Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I am Clint with the Scottish Clans. I thank you for joining me today. We're going to have a little fun with this one today. It's not going to be so academic, but one of the things I love about the topic of the Scottish Clans is how often I bump into these names in just regular everyday life. I have neighbors with the names of the Scottish Clans. There's stores and businesses everywhere you go that have the names of Scottish Clans on them, and some of them are known all over the world. And so I'm watching movies, reading books, and I'm seeing characters with names that are the names of Scottish clans. And so I thought this would be fun. I don't know if this idea first occurred to me while I was watching a Marvel movie and noticed some of the names in there. I was like, oh, and maybe that would be fun to do. Which of these characters actually connect back into a Scottish clan somehow? So that's what we're going to do today. This video is brought to you by USA Kilts. Wonderful products, well-made kilts, sporrans, kilt hose, everything that you need to go with your kilt, and a lot of other stuff that can express your pride in your Scottish heritage. So go over to usakilts.com and also check out their YouTube channel, USA Kilts and Celtic Traditions. Tons of good content on there as well. I also have a few items of my own, if that's interesting to you, which if you're watching this video, I bet it is. I've got some battle shirts, t-shirts with your clan's war cry on the back on a scroll and then your clan's name on the front. Also, I have bandanas in your clan's tartan. You can do anything with bandana, and I call them a clandana. I had a good friend Trent, gave me the idea for that. So thanks, Trent. Let's get on with which characters from the Marvel Comics universe have Scottish last names, not just any Scottish last names. Let's be clear that not every Scottish last name was a Scottish clan. But on the other side of that, I'm not the one who decides whether a group that has a certain last name was or was not a clan. Now, there are some last names and some that you can type clan such and you can get a Wikipedia article on it. Just because I've never read about them as a clan during the historic clan period, just because I haven't read about it doesn't mean they're not. I could give you examples of that, but I think it would be a little bit of a tangent, and I know you want to know which Marvel characters have some tie to a Scottish clan. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, look, once upon a time, I actually was way into comic books, specifically X-Men. It was about between the age of 10 and 11 and maybe 14 or 15. And Wolverine was always my favorite, probably because he's super short, contrary to the way he's portrayed in the movies. Hugh Jackman is anything but short, and I am not a man of great stature myself, so maybe that's one reason I could kind of relate to him, although this guy's a lot tougher than me. So those of you, let me just give you a quick background on Wolverine. His real name is James Howlett, and he was born in the late 19th century in Alberta, Canada, to a wealthy family haunted by tragedy. As a frail child, he discovered his mutant abilities, accelerated healing, enhanced senses, and bone claws. When he killed his biological father in a fit of rage after the man murdered his adoptive father. Exiled and amnesiac from years of trauma and experimentation, he adopted the name Logan and lived as a drifter, mercenary, and soldier across wars from the Civil War to Vietnam. Let me pause real quick right there. I'm not sure that he was in the Civil War if he was born in the late 19th century. That'd be a contradiction there. His skeleton was later bonded with unbreakable adamantium by the Weapon X program, turning him into a living weapon while erasing much of his past. Recruited by Charles Xavier, Wolverine joined the X-Men as their fiercest fighter, often clashing with teammates like Cyclops over his lone wolf instincts and berserker rage. His complex relationships with Jean Grey, whom he loved unrequitedly, Mariko Yashida, his lost soulmate, and clones like X-23, his daughter, defined his struggle between savagery and humanity. Despite countless deaths, resurrections, and memory wipes, Wolverine remains the X-Men's unbreakable survivor, a gruff anti-hero whose catchphrase, "I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do best isn't very nice," captures his eternal war with the animal within. Okay, so that's a little intro to Wolverine. Now, how does he connect to the Scottish clans? Well, if you heard it in there, his birth name is James Howlett. However, he is the offspring of his mother's affair with the groundskeeper, Thomas Logan. And so his actual his lineage comes through the last name Logan. Now, how do the Logans fit into this? Well, the Logans actually have two possible Scottish clan connections. The one is much more of a solid clan connection, and the other one is maybe they were a clan. Once again, I'm not the one who says whether they were or not. Let's go with the most tentative one first. In southwest Scotland, if you type in the last name Logan into named.publicprofiler.org, which I'll include in the notes, you can see where today UK surnames occur the most. Where do they occur the most frequently? And this one's in southwest Scotland. Now, were they a clan? I don't know. They sure do claim to be one. I searched all over the internet for really good historical work on any kind of a clan Logan, and what I found was very, disappointing, I should say. So if you're from the Logan at all connection, maybe do some work because they need it super bad. Now, there's another possible Logan connection, and that is way up in the north with the clan MacLennan. The MacLennans were a West Highland clan. They were actually very loyal and faithful to the MacKenzies, and at times, their chiefs were constables of Eiledonan Castle, which is one of the most photographed castles in all of probably Europe. I actually had a chance to visit there, and they would rotate that constableship with the McRaes, so back and forth, and maybe the Mathesons were in there somewhere as well. So there's a little Scottish clan connection. How do the Logans connect to the MacLennans? That was a little bit fuzzy. It wasn't explained well. It wasn't taught well. Just know that there's a connection. I don't have a firm grasp on it, but like I said, I really did look, and I couldn't find much about it. Whether the Logans were a kind of a parent kindred that the MacLennans grew out of, or whether they are a last name that not really their own clan, but a last name that is found within the ranks of the MacLennans. I'm a little foggy on it. So just know that Ayrshire and southwest Scotland is where you find a lot of Logan last names today in the UK, but there's also some in the Highlands. The name does come from Gaelic. I'm still the different speculation on what the Gaelic root of it is. None of it sounded convincing, so I'm not even going to repeat it to you here. And a little side note here. One of the early frontiersmen / fur trappers back into the state of Utah was named Ephraim Logan, with a clear connection here. And he is the one that Logan, Utah is named after, and that is where I was actually born while my father was attending Utah State University, and from where I graduated as well. Don't claim it as my hometown, but I sure have spent a lot of time in and around here, and it's always been an important place for me, and I live not far from there right now. So there's a Logan connection for myself that's a little personal. All right, who's next? Namor the Submariner. Namor MacKenzie, the Submariner, was born in 1920 as the hybrid son of Atlantean Princess Fen and human sea captain Leonard MacKenzie. Conceived during a brief alliance, quote-unquote, above the waves. Raised in the undersea kingdom of Atlantis as its crown prince, Namor inherited his mother's blue skin, winged ankles, granting flight, and superhuman strength amplified by water, alongside a volatile temper that branded him, quote, the avenging son, unquote. His early surface world raids in the 1930s and 40s, sinking ships and battling Nazis, made him Marvel's first mutant and reluctant hero of the Golden Age, clashing with the original Human Torch while oscillating between protector and conqueror of humanity. After decades of cryogenic stasis and memory loss, Namor resurfaced in the modern era, alternately allying allying with the Fantastic Four, leading the Defenders, and waging war as an eco-terrorist monarch when surface pollution threatened Atlantis. His imperious pride, unrequited love for Sue Storm, and uneasy partnerships with heroes like Captain America reflect a ruler torn between two worlds, forever declaring Imperious Rex as he defends his kingdom with trident and wrath, a sovereign anti-hero who views the surface as both enemy and obligation. That is your little rundown for Namor, which is he wasn't one of the ones I followed really well during my comic book years, but so that was a little help with AI there. Hopefully it was accurate for those of you who are hardcore about Namor. But what is his connection? Well, you heard that his father is actually a MacKenzie. Now his father was American, so he's of Scottish descent. And there in the background you can see scenery near Strathpeffer, where the MacKenzies have their traditional power seat. Earlier I said Eilean was a MacKenzie stronghold, but fairly early on in the MacKenzie rise to power, they actually shifted their center of gravity to Easter-Ross instead of Westeros. And so the Strathpeffer area is north of Inverness. So there's some scenery forward in the background. There's what their tartan looks like. There's a couple of guys by the artist last name Maclay. Anyway, representing the MacKenzies. MacKenzies were a vastly powerful clan in the north of Scotland. They were the Earls of Ross in all but name, but they weren't, right? The title is actually important. There's a lot of cool background on the Earldom of Ross, but I won't go into it now. Just know that the MacKenzies were kind of the biggest thing going on in Ross. The territory stretched from the MacKenzie territory stretched from the west coast to the Murray Firth. And here's something that maybe some of you will think is cool, and some of you will hate me for saying this, but I actually think the MacKenzies were very analogous to the Campbells. They were never quite as powerful as the Campbells. However, they were a very powerful clan, and they did the government's bidding. They were the government's agents in the northern Highlands. Now, that starts to fall apart a little bit as you get into the later 16 and into the 1700s. During the Jacobite rebellions, you see a little bit of a split with which side the Mackenzies were choosing, and there's a whole history there. But as they're up and coming through the 1400s and into the 1500s and well into the 1600s, the Clan Mackenzie actually did play the role of the government agents in the north, enforcing the will of the monarch over those who were not willing to play along, and they benefited therefrom just as the Campbells did. So saw a little bit of a connection there. Who do we got next? Now this one might be a little bit of a stretch. We got Daredevil. Now, Matt Murdock, the man without fear, was born in Hell's Kitchen to boxer Jack Murdock, who instilled in him a fierce sense of justice before being murdered by mobsters for refusing to throw a fight. Blinded as a child by a radioactive accident that heightened his remaining senses to superhuman levels, young Matt trained under the ninja master Stick, mastering radar-like perception, acrobatics, and billy club combat. By day, a brilliant defense attorney with partner Foggy Nelson. By night, he dons the crimson costume of Daredevil, patrolling the rooftops with Catholic guilt and unyielding resolve. His sonar radar sense turning blindness into an edge against Kingpin's empire and assassins like Bullseye. Daredevil's crusade has fractured his life through doomed romances with Elektra, Karen Page, and Typhoid Mary, and brutal betrayals that exposed his identity and sent him to prison. Mentored by Spider-Man, allied uneasily with the Punisher, and haunted by the demon within, he balances legal victories in the courtroom with vigilante justice in the shadows, forever whispering, "Justice is blind," as he leaps into the night. His unbreakable will, forged in loss and faith, makes him Marvel's street-level guardian, a devil who fights for the soul of his city, even when it costs him everything. There's a little rundown on Daredevil. All right, so you heard that his last name is his name is Matt Murdock. Now, were the Murdocks a clan? At first, I was like, man, these guys are kind of like the Logans without the northern clan connection with the Logans had to the McLennans, and there's not an analogous situation to the Murdochs, and then I proved myself wrong. Now, the Murdochs, like the Logans, are very common as far as the occurrence of the last name in southwest Scotland. So the picture that you can see on the bottom right, I think that's Galloway. And so I was just trying to find some cool scenery from southwest Scotland. There's the Murdoch tartan on the left. Actually, you know what that is? That's the MacDonald of Clanranald tartan, because the Murdochs, there's actually a sept, a branch of the MacDonalds of Clanranald who were called Shiel Verchi, or the seed of Murdoch in English. And they feuded with Shiel Gorey in North Uist, so way out on the outer Hebrides. And so there is an actual, no kidding, clan connection with the Murdoch last name. So there you go. Once again, the ones in southwest Scotland, I'm not the one that says they are or weren't a clan. I just haven't seen anything in southwest Scotland about a kindred of Murdochs following a chief and all those sort of hallmark items that would designate you as a clan instead of just a last name that more than one family has. All right. Next one is unique here. The next one we got is Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane, her real name is Rain Sinclair. She was born in the Scottish Highlands. So this one, not just Scottish roots. She was actually born in the Scottish Highlands to a strict Presbyterian minister who condemned her as a devil's spawn when her mutant lycanthropy manifested at puberty, shifting her into a red-furred wolf or transitional wolf-human form with enhanced senses, strength, and agility. Orphaned after her father's attempted murder triggered her powers, she was rescued by geneticist Moira MacTaggert, who became her foster mother and enrolled her in Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. There, Rain joined the New Mutants alongside Cannonball and Sunspot, struggling to reconcile her feral instincts with her devout faith, often praying in wolf form and fearing the beast within as a sin against God. Wolfsbane's life, fractured through brainwashing by the villainous Animator on Paradise Island, a near-fatal romance with the Asgardian wolf prince Hrimhari that produced a hybrid son and forced transformations into a mindless mutate by Genosha's magistrates. Reintegrated into X-Factor under Havoc, then exiled with the militant X-Force, she oscillated between gentle healer and savage predator, her Scottish brogue masking centuries-old guilt. Whether howling at the moon with feral or kneeling in confession, Rain remains a tormented soul forever, caught between pack loyalty and divine judgment, her cry of, "Lord, forgive the wolf," echoing across battlefields and chapels alike. All right, so there's your little background on Wolfsbane. And like you said, or heard there, her real name is Rain Sinclair. So, who are the Sinclairs? The Sinclairs actually held territory. They're a Norman clan that came into Scotland with probably during the reign of David I, although not every Norman family came in during him, but he was probably responsible for the majority of them. They came into Scotland and soon acquired lands all over Scotland. But as far as being a clan is concerned, it's easiest to see the Sinclairs as a clan, with their chiefs as the Earls of Caithness. So way up in the very far north of Scotland, they became involved in Caithness and Orkney affairs when the Northern Isles, like Orkney and Shetland, still belonged to Denmark. So actually the Sinclairs have a lot of interaction with the Scandinavian world as the Earls of Caithness and being involved in Orkney as well. And not only did they have interaction with the Scandinavian world, but you know that the Scandinavians were pushing out to Iceland and even Greenland and even North America. There is a legend of a Henry Sinclair, who is the Earl of Orkney and Baron of Roslin, who may have journeyed to Nova Scotia and Massachusetts as early as 1398, 100 years before Columbus, several hundred years after the Vikings did it, but still, pretty cool history. Now, not every scholar or historian believes that was the case. Just a little bit more about the Sinclairs. I'll let you look up Henry Sinclair, the Earl of Orkney, and decide whether you think he actually made it to America or not. I know the History Channel's done some stuff on, what is that, Oak Island or something like that in Nova Scotia. I'll let you study that out, and you can decide. Put it in the comments whether you actually think Henry Sinclair made it to the Americas. Now, the Clan Sinclair, going back to the clan, they supported Montrose in the Scottish Civil Wars, meaning that they took the side of the royalty versus the Covenanters. And during the Jacobite rebellions in the 1700s, the Sinclairs were Jacobites in 1715, but they switched and joined the Hanoverians for the 1745 Jacobite Rising. So I have done some content on that. I did a whole thing on the Frasers and why they may have gone back and forth like that. Maybe I need to do some content for this clan in that respect. But let's move on to our next Marvel character with a Scottish connection. Now, this is the Red Hulk. This is not Bruce Banner. The Red Hulk's real name is Thaddeus E. Ross, nicknamed Thunderbolt. A hard-charging U.S. Army general with a career forged in Vietnam and Cold War Black Ops. He became obsessed with capturing the Hulk after blaming Bruce Banner for the death of his daughter Betty during the Gamma explosion that birthed the Green Goliath. Relentless and authoritarian, Ross commanded the Hulkbusters, deployed gamma-powered weapons, and even allied with villains like the Leader, his iron gray mustache and cigar-chomping fury masking a father's grief turned to vengeance. Decades of pursuit eroded his marriage, his sanity, and his moral compass, culminating in a secret deal with the intelligentsia and MODOK that infused him with gamma energy, transforming him into the crimson-skinned Red Hulk, stronger, heat-radiating, and cunning enough to absorb energy and outthink his prey. As Red Hulk, Ross operated covertly, assassinating the Abomination, faking Banner's death, and leading the government-sanctioned Red Hulk task force while hiding his identity behind a military facade. His rampages drew the wrath of the Avengers, a brutal showdown with the Green Hulk, and uneasy alliances with the Thunderbolts and Code Red, all while wrestling with the monster he swore to destroy, now raging inside him. Pardoned and reformed into a hulking anti-hero, Ross later reclaimed his human form but retained the power to, quote-unquote, go red at will. His gravel-voiced battle cry, "Ross Smash for America!" echoing a patriot's redemption or a general's final war against himself. All right, so Thaddeus Ross, General Ross here. Now, I might take a second to use the Rosses as an example of this concept. There are Rosses who are not part of the Clan Ross whose chief was the Ross of Balnagowan. There are Rosses in other parts of Scotland that I know of were unrelated to these ones, but these were a very powerful clan in the north of Scotland. They're up there in the vicinity of the Munros and the MacKenzies and that world north of Inverness. They are descended from Ferchar MacTaggert of the O'Beolan clan and the first Earl of Ross. This Ferchar was the first Earl of Ross after the Maceths were defeated. Now, Maceth, Heth, really is Mackay. They were defeated. The remnants of them fled north, settled in Strathnaver, became the Mackays. So they were this kindred. Their chiefs were the Earls of Ross. But that was a break, and then Ferchar MacTaggert, for valorous siding with the king against an uprising that maybe it was the Mackays or the Maceths that were part of it. Anyway, he is given the earldom of Ross. And so that is who the Rosses claim as their ancestor. Ferchar's descendants for a few generations, his son, grandson, and maybe one more generation, they actually kept the surname O'Beolan, which is a cool, rare instance of the O that is so common in Ireland in Scotland. And then they eventually just used the earldom, the name of the earldom, as their surname. Now later, the earldom would pass out of this kindred's hands through marriage into, this becomes a whole other huge tangent of Scottish history that we could go into. But the clan remains, and even though the earldom passed out of their lineage through marriage to a different group, they actually just passed over the chiefship. They kept their own chief, and he was just another male representative of the leading kindred. And so they kept a Ross as their chief, right? So unlike the Sutherlands, where that not only did the earldom pass out of the Sutherlands' hands, but also the chief position did, these guys kept the chief thing in-house. It did not pass out with marriage. Now, the Clan Ross, they saw shifting loyalty during the Scottish Civil Wars, but by the time we get to the Jacobite risings, they were decisively Hanoverian, where they fought alongside their allies, the Monroes, the Mackays, and the Sutherlands. Now, when I say the allies, just keep in mind that was a dynamic situation too, and clans that were allies during one point of history, 100 years or so earlier or later, are now enemies. But during those Jacobite rebellions, the Monroes, the Mackays, and the Sutherlands were all on the same side. Just a little branching into other clans there. All right, now we cannot leave out Moira MacTaggert. Now, she was a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist born to Scottish aristocracy. She discovered her mutant reincarnation ability after dying in a terrorist attack, each death resetting her to birth with full memories of prior timelines, making her the X-Men's secret architect of survival across realities. In her earliest lives, she married politician Joseph MacTaggert, bore Proteus, so gave birth to Proteus, the reality-warping Kevin, and endured abuse that hardened her into a relentless strategist. By the way, her maiden name is Kinross. Later cycles saw her ally with Charles Xavier as his fiancé, housekeeper, and covert Moira X, manipulating Krakoa's resurrection protocols and the Phoenix Force to outmaneuver threats like Apocalypse and Orcus. Her Highland estate on Muir Island became a mutant research hub, sanctuary, and prison where she cured the legacy virus, housed the X-Men during crises, and once fell to Mystique's betrayal in a timeline she later erased. Across 10 documented lives, scientist, Black Wasp assassin, anti-mutant crusader, and finally the Gardener of Destiny, Moira hoarded knowledge in no-space journals, rebooted universes with Shi'ar tech, and sacrificed lovers, friends, and her own humanity to ensure mutant ascension. Her brogue-laced whisper, "This is the life that matters," masks centuries of grief as she navigates alliances with Magneto, Xavier's darker impulses, and Destiny's prophecies, forever rewriting history to keep Homo Superior alive. All right. Now, the thing about the MacTaggerts is, I already gave you the history of their clan. The MacTaggerts were not their own clan. They were actually a surname that was found amongst Clan Ross. If you remember, the founder of the Clan Ross was Ferachar MacTaggert, which means son of the priest, and a branch of this lineage kept that surname. So they're not a completely different group than Clan Ross. They're a subset within Clan Ross. I don't know if a cadet branch would be wholly accurate, but definitely they are part of that clan. Yeah, that's all I've got to say about the MacTaggerts, but I thought that Moira needed to be included here. And our last one, you bet, Iron Man. Now, some of you are thinking, how is Stark a Highland clan? Well, I'll get to that. Anthony Edward Stark, the billionaire genius born to industrialist Howard Stark, transformed a near-fatal shrapnel wound in a Vietnamese cave into the birth of Iron Man, forging a powered exoskeleton that saved his life and ignited a legacy of arc reactor brilliance. Playboy turned philanthropist, he weaponized Stark Industries until guilt over collateral deaths drove him to dismantle its arms division, donning red and gold armor with repulsors, AI companion Jarvis, and bleeding-edge nanotechnology to battle threats from Obadiah Stane to Thanos. His quips and cocktails mask PTSD, alcoholism, and the ticking reactor in his chest as he funds the Avengers from Stark Tower while secretly building contingency armors like Hulkbuster and the Anti-Phoenix suit. From Civil War's betrayal of Captain America to Ultron's apocalyptic birth from his own code, Tony's hubris and heroism collide in cosmic stakes, snapping half the universe back with a gauntlet-forged sacrifice that killed him, resurrected in timelines or honored by his daughter Morgan's I Love You 3000. Iron Man remains Marvel's futurist, whispering, "Sometimes you gotta run before you can walk." As he soars, a man in a can who proved the heart of a hero beats louder than any machine. All right, there's your. By the way, I had Grok help me with all these little blurbs from this, and I think he's pulling from a combination of the comic books and the movies, and I know that they always don't exactly agree with each other, so thank you for being patient if you're a hardcore comic person. I am not. I told you as a youth I was into it for a little while, and then I wasn't. But there's your intro for Iron Man, and these intros are largely for the people who don't already know a lot about these Marvel characters. But what is there a clan Stark? How does he tie into Scottish clans? And for this one, I'm so glad that we're represented down on the border. The Armstrongs were a notorious border clan that presented security issues for the English and neighboring clans. Their chief was Armstrong of Mangerton, and their territory was principally in Liddesdale. They are often associated with the Elliots. They often rode together. The cool thing about the border clans, the border reaver clans, is that they were cavalry, largely. I'm not telling you they never went dismounted, because I know of certain instances where you do have dismounts fighting. However, the kind of the distinguishing factor on the border guys is their use of the horse, which I think is cool because I was raised in a horse culture. Anyway, Armstrongs, Elliots, buddies. Many Armstrongs actually ended up in Northern Ireland, and many Americans, both from U.S. and Canada. I don't know so much about the Australians or New Zealanders or other groups that have part of the Scottish diaspora, but a lot of people in the North America who have Armstrong ancestry actually can trace their line through Ulster families, meaning their ancestors came from Scotland via Northern Ireland. And that right there is my effort to connect two things I think are cool: the Marvel characters and the Scottish clans. So if this was something that was interesting to you, let me know in the comments if you want to hear more of this type of thing. I could do a DC version of this. Also, did I miss any Marvel characters that really, really need to be included? By no means is this supposed to be an exhaustive list, and I'm sure that you can find plenty of other characters that I missed. I was trying to pick some of the major ones, and I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you tied into any of these, or just put your clan in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. If you want to reach out to me, my email is thescottishclans@gmail.com. And if you want to know more about me or go to the website, it's scottishclans.info. Pretty easy. And we got a really cool Facebook group as well, just called the Scottish Clans Podcast. Reach out to me and or go over and check out the podcast. There's tons of content on there that's not on YouTube. Either way, Barshin Lev and Rasta.